Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Come on, a bit of energy. Good morning, everyone. Good stuff. I know it's early on Saturday morning. I haven't had my yam and egg sauce yet, which typically, so this conference is the reason why I'm here to represent our Chief Executive, Wole Adeniyi. But I'll be making his presentation. I lead the private and personal banking at Stanbic IBTC. And as an organization, we do look at, when you talk about doing business in Nigeria, we're an organization itself that does business. We have a parent that invested significant capital into Nigeria. And we also have clients, both on the individual and corporate side, that are doing business in Nigeria, and we help them to navigate it. All right, so this is actually this is not the slide, but we'll go with this. I had addressed my team last week, and looking at the business of doing business in Nigeria, we always say, how do I bring it to something that is more meaningful? And we look at Nigeria as a country. Nigeria is like climbing a mountain. If you think of a mountaineer, why is Nigeria so exciting? So climbing a big mountain, if you look at it, the GDP of Nigeria, gross domestic product, depending on the exchange rate, is about $475 billion. $475 billion. And if you look at the second slide, we'll go to the second slide. Okay. Actually, let's go back to the first. You don't have the latest one. There is a particular, please, can I get the slide I sent this morning? The slide I sent this morning, that actually, no, you don't have it? Okay, all right, let's go with it. So in Nigeria today, why are we excited about doing business, or the country, before we actually doing the business? Gross domestic product, I said, is $475 billion. We have just about 200 million people. One of my analysts gave us an analysis last week that said four states, or let's say 5 states in the north, accounts for 54 million. 5 states in the northern Nigeria accounts for 54 million people. That is more than the population of Kenya. So in this country, the size does matter. That is why a lot of companies are excited about coming to Nigeria to do business. The population is 200 plus people. The size of the business is just over 475 billion. If you look at 2010 to 2023, I'm just trying to record the numbers. 4 or 5% of the GDP was telecom. 4% of the GDP of Nigeria in 2010 was telecom, media, and technology. In 2023, it's over 17%. And we know why. Because all of us now are using the broadband, data centers, lots of investments have come in. So the size has increased in terms of the pie, but also the shift in the sectors that are running Nigeria's business. So this is the size, in terms of GDP. The growth, you can see that the country is growing about 3% per annum. On the population of 200 plus million, the population is growing at 5% per annum. That's 5 million people every year. When we go to church, I go to my church every week. It's like everybody's pregnant. We see pregnant folks around. So you can see that this country, the size of the population, and one of the exciting things that also as part of being part in Nigeria, doing business in Nigeria, is the median age. So in terms of the shape of the population, the median age is 19 years old. 19 years old is the median age. So very young population, a lot of them, and executing in the country. If you look at the growth, the trend, the trend of that population is growing, and then we also see that the mortality rate, the bottom left slide here shows that the women actually outlive the men. The average age of the men is about 55 years old, while the women are 57. So we have to figure out what the women are doing differently. But I think the general feedback is that, look, there's more women living, more women living longer than men. Let's go to the next slide. And what is making it complicated? So when I think about climbing a mountain, I said about the mountain, which is the Nigerian mountain. It's not straightforward, right? It's very interesting. The exchange rates we've seen, we all live here, we all know how the exchange rate has increased. 2010, it was 150 naira to the dollar. 150 naira in 2010. In 2023, 2024, we all know what went to about 1,005. So just the exchange rate of doing business, if you have to import, interestingly enough, even if you're not importing, if you want to buy something in the market today, they will tell you that the market, the exchange rate, I said, from buying goat meat, what's going on there? So the exchange, you can see the flatness of that graph is managed exchange rate. And then once it was released, you see how volatile it is. The inflation, you can go to the next slide as well. Actually, this is not my slide. You have to change this, please. But let's carry on too. Yeah, I'm not sure. This is not my slide. But the point is that the inflation is going at about 30 to 35%, which talks to the rate of price increasing. And so the government is actually trying to change that in terms of monetary policy to say, how do we wrestle inflation down? By increasing the exchange rate. By increasing the interest rate. And by increasing interest rate, we know that monthly MPR is at 24.75. You want to encourage more people to save. And by directing the funds from spending to saving. And that would, hopefully, in economic terms, it would wrestle down the inflation. Interest rate is high, though. So for doing business, it's going to be costly to borrow. So you therefore have to make sure that you are borrowing with a very clear plan to execute on your strategy. All right. So inflation is going quite high. You want to pull it down. Interest rate is going to be used to pull down inflation, and of course, exchange rate. With confidence and with encouraging investors to come in to invest in these T-bills and bonds, it will help encourage investors. Foreign portfolio investors will come through, foreign direct investment will come through, and ultimately it would neutralize the exchange rate. I'll just carry on. I think I do have my slides here. So in the last year, the current government set up to really, macro decisions were made. Very tough decisions were made. One is the portfolio subsidy removal. By removing that portfolio subsidy, it was tough because then you see one of the slides that I have, the petrol PMS prices went up to as high as 600 naira from about 250. So that is pinching the operational environment, but ultimately saving funds from the subsidy and directing those subsidy payments to something more productive is something that was welcome. And of course, the reform of FX, no intervention in FX. The current governor wants free-flowing trade between the buyer and the seller. So let the market determine the price. And it actually happened. I think we've seen now that in the last couple of days, the FX impact has stabilized. Okay, this is the slide. Thank you. Very good. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. And that was you can go back. That was the mountain I was thinking about. That to go to Nigeria, you are climbing a mountain. And the mountain is a big mountain. So I deliberately put this here so that you don't have a version of your own mountain. I know in my church we've said this mountain, remove. Well, you actually have to climb some mountains to grow. That was what I shared with my team last week. So this is the country Nigeria. The opportunity is massive, and you have to climb it. Why would you not climb? Why are a lot of companies sitting on the edge, not coming into the country? Why is it not that exciting? Because you have to navigate. So to climb a mountain, Wole, who is our chief executive, he actually climbed this mountain, the Kilimanjaro, many years ago with a team. I've told my team as well that we'll go as a team to climb Kilimanjaro. So you need why? Why would you not climb the mountain? One is fear. You are just scared, right? Two is the skill and to be able to navigate. So we can go to the next slide. So therefore, we're encouraging that, and this is why we applaud the conference, which is doing business in Nigeria. It's not easy, but the opportunity is there. And if you can work together, the four things. One is you need to start climbing. Some of us have showed up here for the conference today. One is start climbing the mountain. Okay? Number two is to stay climbing. How would you stay climbing this mountain? You won't give up. The third point is you have to not climb alone. Climb with people, climb with your bankers, climb with advisors. This conference is helping us to set the tone. How do you do something? But work in teams. And the fourth one is, try not to manage detractors. So if you go through this is the slide I was talking about, 472 billion. There are 11 cities that are a million people in Nigeria. This is why we are excited at Stanbic IBTC every morning to say the opportunity is immense. The average age is 18, 19 years old. The adult population is about 62. What else? And the population is growing at 5%, and the country itself, in a worst case scenario, is going to grow at 2.6%. All right? So let's go to the next slide. This is the one that was interesting. So this slide, this basically talks about the years and the shape of the GDP, the GDP of Nigeria. And if you look, the mining and quarry, which is the oil and gas, the mining of oil and gas, it was 15% in 2010. It is today, as of 2023, is less than 6%. And the reason is that other sectors have come in to be more relevant. So if you point to information and communication, that was about 5% in 2010. It is now 17%. So just talking about, more diversification of the GDP across sectors. Let's go to the next slide, please. I think we've shared this already to talk about the pub. So the reforms that had to happen, the deficit in the country is quite large, and the goal is really to reduce that deficit, fiscal deficit, as a percentage of the GDP. So the government, the ministers, they're trying to do that, whereby the fiscal deficit is reducing over time, and you want to improve the GDP growth. That 2010 number shot to 3.4%, and now we're looking at GDP growth about 2.7%. So again, if you create the right environment, we want that GDP growth. But look at the inflation. That is just pretty steep, 37% looking at 2024 or so. So we need to really wrestle down, and that's what through monetary policy, to wrestle down the inflation. Let's go to the next slide, please. Talked about that, remove the subsidy. You're going to make tough decisions. Tough decisions need to be made to change this environment, to change any government, any policy. The economy is a big ship. It's not a speedboat. You got to change, but you got to be resilient and stay close to it. So basically, take off the removal of subsidy for petroleum and removal of FX management. Just keep your hands off. Let the market manage that. Next slide. Okay, and if that happens, we just want to see that with that discipline, the deficit will start to improve, the GDP growth will get better, and the inflation will start tending down. All right, that's really what the outcome should be. Next slide. The adjustment, this is the adjustment. We all live in Lagos, Nigeria, across the country. We've seen the petrol subsidy. Now it takes, I think it's 50,000 or so to fill my tank. I was shocked when my driver said, 50-something thousand. First of all, I said, don't worry, I'll fill my own tank myself. So this thing was around 20,000, now 50,000. Nobody's driving anywhere to go and visit anybody. right? You want to be very disciplined. So that is the cost of just the PMS itself. We are missing the top part of the graph, but that's what this graph is saying. The cost of living is just shooting up quite much. And we need to try and manage that. No matter how much you're earning, you need to manage your expenses. Next slide. This just talks to the volatility of the exchange rate. And hopefully with this level, things are going to again start coming down and start tabling off. Next slide, please. This just talks to the commodity price. So we've seen the maize has gone up in 3 years by 238 naira. I mean, the trending in the graph is just showing that the cost of living is rising. And the last graph on the right talks about the number of poor people. And according to the World Bank, it's just over 104 million as a result of this expensive way of living. So this is the cold hard facts. How do we now move forward? Let's go to the next slide. Coping mechanism, we've seen the government try to do some large-scale cash transfers of 25,000 per month. This is encouraging, but ultimately you want the population to be able to produce, be able to improve their education, get a better job, but we're still finding out that these are quick palliative solutions that is happening right now. Let's go to the next slide quickly. Again, it talks about the yield. In the last couple of weeks now, we've seen the yields of the government bonds, treasury bills improve. We've seen foreign portfolio investors inflow funds if you're seeing 20%, 25% yield, it's mouth-watering for some folks. So we're seeing our clients coming in, investing through the bonds and yields, and it has helped stabilize the FX as well. So that's just what this slide is trying to say. So turning the corner, now even though this top left graph says growth, it is just showing about the pace of growth. So the whole pillar is talking about growth. The message here is that the growth it will go, but it will slow down. All right? It will be at a slower pace. And what needs to happen? One is you need to let's process the production of oil that we're making in Nigeria. The crude oil, let's make sure that you refine them and also increase the number of barrels that are produced. In an environment where the general price of oil rises, Nigeria should be able to take advantage of that price increase in the next couple of years. Infrastructure, no matter what you produce, the cost of, we saw a statistics that the cost of shipping a product from China to Lagos, the shipping from the port to the north is probably the same or more. So, infrastructure just needs to get better, clearing the products, getting through to the ports, getting through to the final destination. So distributing of products should be, more investment. Security, and of course, we talk about mortgage. We're doing a lot of that in Stanbic IBTC, trying to create new mortgage solutions just to enable our individual Nigerians to live a better life. We'll go to the next slide quickly. Now, I think this is one of the last two I have. So the first one is, how do you, make the full turn? We've talked about curbing the inflation, which is just redirecting the spending to savings. And those that will spend, you spend what you actually require. More physical space, so growing the non-oil business. We've seen that in telecom. We want to do more in real estate, in education, and in other sectors to step up the game. And of course, addressing the structural barriers. Just make it easy, a better place to operate. You want to import goods, make it simple, make it transparent. In some countries, make it digital to be able to produce and execute products in the country. Next slide. We took this from the Ministry of Finance, and I think the overarching message is we've talked about population growth at 5% while production growth is at 2.7%. We need to flip that, where production is growing faster than population. That's really what this message is saying. Increase the production of products. So not just extracting products and selling, but extracting products and improving the value to improve the overall productivity, which improves the GDP of the country. The next slide. And of course, encourage foreign portfolio investors. In 2010, we saw that a lot. We worked on a number of transactions at Stanbic IBTC. I think Kellogg came in at that time. Colgate came in at that time. A couple of multinationals came in to invest. What we want is to continue to increase that. So foreign portfolio investors, as I said, a lot of companies are at the border, but they're just dipping their toes in. How do you open up, create the environment to encourage the companies to come in? And of course, overall, once those investments come in, it enables the FX supply. I think that's the last slide. If not, yeah. Thank you very much. Questions, comments?
Yes. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and Mr. Delano will be happy. I said Delano. See, I'm a Bushman. We'll be happy to answer. Okay, I think I need to step away from the speaker. Okay, Mr. Delano. Okay, I'll go first. Yeah. The DBNC put out, I think I was looking at the Instagram page, and they had a list asking business owners what's the highest hurdle that you face as an SME in the country? And I think the access to finance was one of them. You've already mentioned interest rates in your presentation. So, and you're with a bank, won't put you on the spot, but in terms of the banks in general, how are they viewing getting lending over to these SMEs that need the necessary finance for their operations?
Yeah, thank you. So if I look at I'll speak generally for the bank. The purpose of the banks really is to enable our customers to grow their business. At Stanbic IBTC, we have a very, very clear saying, which is Africa is our home. We drive our growth. We have got rid of investment across Argentina and different countries and invested in Africa and Nigeria. And the SME, the corporate, is an absolute focus as a sector in the bank. We even have a specific focus to women, the women in business as well. In lending, you have to make sure that when you are lending to an organization, an individual, or a small business, the probability of success will be high. So we actually spend time with them, even though you say you are seeking a lending opportunity, but we actually will spend time with them to say, look, this business as it is, you need to tweak A, B, C, D, and therefore your business plan is viable enough for you to borrow from us, or for us to lend to you. I just want to assure you that we do have a team, we have a sector, we have capital available for the SME, and not just for SMEs, but SME for the women as well, and all the way to the large corporates. But the message is around funding a viable business. Some of the business plan we see, they're not as you have to ask the question. Your numbers must stack up, but we're very open to lending to SMEs. We have a very strong portfolio in the bank, and ultimately the goal of the organization of our bank is to enable our Nigerian businesses to grow, and for individuals, sole proprietors, to live a better life. Thank you.
All right, we have a gentleman here with a question. Will you introduce yourself?
Good morning, Mr. Delano.
Morning.
I'm Ayomide by name. My question is concerning the banking sector. You seems to be from. So, according to a report recently, I think 2 months ago, the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, they made a complaint about the level of the manufacturing industry that has actually collapsed, had to close up. One of the reasons they gave was that there wasn't easy access to funding, in terms of loans. So my question in particular to that is, what is the banking sector doing with probably, I quite understand all of your policy are based on the CBN instruction, but what are you doing in terms of making sure that these people are also productive? Because if the manufacturing sector is not productive, meanwhile, the banking sector seems to be like monthly, the profit takes they are generating is very massive. But the engine of the economy is collapsing before our own very eyes. So what is it the banking sector has done so far in making sure this doesn't continue?
Okay. If I would direct you to our 2023 annual reports or annual numbers that we just released, and you see that, and it's a public information, there is a significant shift in the pillars of our businesses. We have personal and private bank, which is the individual lending to either individuals or sole proprietors. We have seen that increase significantly year on year in the last couple of years. Our loans to small and medium-sized enterprises has also increased. And the thinking really, when you talk about the bank has made money, we make money from our customer engagement. And the customer engagement that's the outcome. Really, we look at how do you enable our customers to live a better life. That's why I'm excited every morning when I get up to go to work. How do I enable all these corporates to grow? The way we see customers, and especially the SMEs and the small business enterprises, is they are part of an ecosystem. They are part of an ecosystem of a larger organization. All the multinationals, they still have to distribute their products. They are suppliers to companies, or they are distributors from those products. So we are part of that. We see them as one holistic ecosystem, and we're funding and we're engaging on that basis. As I said, we're happy to chat anytime, but we are open for business, happy to fund SMEs, happy to fund women SMEs. I keep saying that, and I think we're protesting in the bank and say we want a men SME as well, but I know we're absolutely focused on the women, and statistics have shown, as you've seen, they live longer than men, they are more disciplined. Those are the stats. And so we're happy to do those small business enterprises, but either men or women, it's really not either here nor there. We see these companies as a part of an ecosystem of a larger piece. And as long as your data and your business stacks up, and we're happy we won't advise, but we'll work with you to get to a better space to be able to provide the required funding for the business.
Akitade Olusegun is my name. I represent Obasanjo Farms Nigeria Limited. So my question is going to be centered around agriculture. From the statistics shown shown before, there's something that came to my mind. When I saw that, I said, oops. I discovered that from 2010 till date, the contribution of agriculture to the economy has dropped drastically from 40% to 25%. How do we tackle this? We are talking of increasing our GDP, and agriculture is dropping. That's a very big problem. How do we solve that? And the question is, in the MPR, the interest rate was set higher. I have a very little problem with this. If we use high interest rate to drive down our inflation rate, what happens to the ease of doing business? Agriculture as a case study. In agriculture, your return on investment is expected to be between 10 and 15%. And I heard that government has set up a bank they call Bank of Industry. I don't know how many of the farms in Nigeria have been able to access loans from the bank at sub 10%. That's a question I want you to actually help us look into. That is financing agriculture. Because if we still want to improve on our economy, then agriculture should be growing. That is what we see in other developed nations. But for agriculture to be dropping from 40 to 25 is a signal that is not good for the economy. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that observation, and thanks that you were present. So that percentage, I have to check with the analysts. It doesn't mean the agriculture business reduced. What that statistics was showing is that as a percentage of the GDP of Nigeria, it was highly concentrated to agriculture 2010 at 40%. And industries like telecom were 5%. Over time, agriculture has reached as a percentage of the GDP to 25%, while sectors like telecom has gone to 17.5%. We've seen real estate also grown. So overall, in a best case scenario, you want to be more diversified as an industry, as a sector. in the country. So, but the question really is to check the data to see, has agriculture actually reduced in terms of absolute number? And I'll have to come back to you and I get our analysts to and our economists. I don't have that number with me. The second point around the rate. Look, that's the conundrum of managing inflation versus growing the business. The inflation is running off. In fact, we had a session with our economists, with IMF, and what happened in Brazil was at a lower rate at 4, 5, 6, 7, 10%. Inflation is very slow to grow. It takes a lot to grow that inflation rate. The moment it gets to 30, it's a lot easier to get to 40. It's a lot easier to get to 50, right? And it has happened in some South American countries. So the advice is don't let this thing run off. You literally, we've seen situations where you go to a store today, this is the price. You go to the store in the afternoon, the price has changed. That's a hyperinflation situation, which it tends to be, I'm not an economist, but that's just based on what we're hearing from our team. It tends to accelerate. And at 35 to 40%, it can. So the monetary policy rate is to wrestle it down, to redirect spending away from spending on to drive inflation to spending on saving. And once you make that decision, the cost of borrowing will be high. And I think, we're happy to engage. You will have to spend more on the cost of borrowing, but you want to make sure that your business, in terms of who you're plugged into, in terms of ecosystem, is a lot more viable. And I think you just have to weather the storm. Once that high inflation is wrestled down by higher interest rate, we'll see that interest rate coming down. Hopefully it will be tapering down. I'm not sure if it's going to be this year, but I'm not part of the policy rate. But that's the principle around this level of rates that are going through right now.